some of us are even aware of what we were, where we were, and how we were before this birth thing seemed to overtake us. I imagine that some of you are. In fact, I know that some of you are, because I've talked with you. I know that some of you are aware of what you were, where you were, what things were like, how wonderful it all was before this thing called birth seemed to descend upon you. So, now I do not mean, when I speak of this, I'm not talking about a former incarnation. I do not believe in reincarnation. No, because, no, I don't. Then I'll tell you why. Because if you're going to have reincarnation, you're going to have birthing and dying and birthing and dying and birthing and dying forever. And I don't believe that God is that kind of a God. So I don't believe in reincarnation. So it's not that. I do not believe, I don't mean a former incarnation. There are no former incarnations. Nonetheless, some of us do clearly remember the peace, the perfection, the heaven that we experienced before we seemed to suffer the rude shock of being born. It's no wonder we yell our heads off when we're supposed to. Well, anyhow. But now I'm going to tell you this. This is for those of you who don't seem to as yet remember what you were and how you were before you seemed to be born. You were not bodiless, you know. Those of you who have experienced know. You know that you had bodies. You know that your body was absolute perfection. You know it never troubled you. It was just as normal as well, for heaven's sakes, as life itself. It's just you know. You knew that you were an identity. You knew that every identity was absolute perfection. You saw the bodies, you saw the forms, you saw the activity. Actually, you saw God. It's perfectly normal to see God. Whenever you see perfection, you see God. You see. So you were not bodiless. But I'm not talking about a born body in another incarnation. Many of these so-called young people are resentful that they were born. Did all of you hear that? Many of these young people are resentful that they were born. I can remember very well how resentful I was when I was a little girl. I felt if I hadn't been born, that I'd still be with God. I said so to my mother. I said, why didn't you leave me with God? Isn't that an awful thing to say? But now these young people, this is the basis of the problem. So I wanted to go into this most definitely. Now some of these boys and girls have even told their parents that they didn't ask to be born into this world. You've heard it. You've heard it. They find themselves living here in a world of chaos, trouble, war, hatred, and the like. Don't like it, and do you blame them? I don't. But they don't know what to do about it. So they thrust out against it. They try to destroy what they call the establishment, but which is only the world as it appears to be. That's what they're thrusting out against, is the world as it appears to be. Still, God love them. Many of them are seeking a better world or a better way of life. But not knowing better, they're seeking it in the wrong way. Some of them imagine that communism is the answer. But of course, this would only mean greater bondage. Still, these youngsters continue to blame the parents. Who is to blame? No one. No one, absolutely no one is to blame. These parents are not to blame for the birth of these youngsters, but neither are the youngsters to blame for their attitude. Now, I'll explain that former statement in a few minutes. Neither are the youngsters to blame for their attitude, so we're not going to censor anyone. But there is an explanation as to why this situation does seem to exist. In order to find the reason for all this miasma, we must go back through the centuries. That's what we have to do. We must go all the way back to the basic falsity, which names God as a creator. You see this? That's right. Names God as a creator. And man to be his creation. Now right here is the very basis of all duality. Right here is the basis of all duality. God creating man, God and man. Now man has been taught to believe that God is a creator, and he has believed this to be true. Thus man, being imitative by nature, has imagined that he too must be a creator, trying to make himself into the image and likeness of God, don't you see? Which we've been told to do. Now can you see why none of us are to blame for this? Not a one of us are to blame for this. So he in turn believes that he is a creator. He believes that he can create other men, other lives, but this is utterly false. God is the only life, and God is eternal, and he does not create and destroy himself, itself. How then can life be created? Can you imagine anyone imagining that he can create life, create God? Can you imagine it? What's been the matter with us all this time? I ask myself this I don't know how many times during the day and night. Well, why didn't I see it before? For goodness sake. I remember once I used to get so impatient, and you know, I went to my beloved husband and I stood in front of him and I literally beat him on the chest with my fist and I said, Kenneth, why am I so slow? Why am I so slow? You know, why don't I see it all now? You know. And bless his heart, he just took my hands in his and looked into my face and he said, never mind. You will. But it is so ridiculous to imagine how egotistical can we get. We can create life, God. Above all, could man, if such there were, create God, the only life? We can easily discern the complete fallaciousness of this attitude. But let us return to our primary subject. You know, another thing, I've got to say it now. It's just as ridiculous to imagine. They claim that intelligence is born into the body, and man the baby body, that sort of thing. Well, for goodness sake, does man create intelligence? Just imagine. We can now see that the whole uproar being evidenced as the so-called young people today stems from an inherent knowledge that their eternal, harmonious life has been interrupted. That's all a birth seems to do, is to interrupt our eternal, happy, well, it's heaven. And a deep resentment at these interruptions is what these youngsters are feeling. And they are resentful of their parents because, not knowing any better, their parents supposedly forced them into this illusory world of violence, trouble, pain. Now that's where the trouble comes. Can you see it? That's the thing. You know, this came through night after night. Of course, night and day I've been aware of this. But this came through, some of it audibly, and some of it without words. But it was one of the most beautiful things, and I felt it was very important. This is one of the reasons why this symposium is being given. We're needed very much. Now, what is the answer to this seeming problem? Well, what is the answer to any seeming problem? You've got to go back to basics every time. The answer is the absolute truth. That's the answer. That's the only answer for any so-called problem. Because anything they call truth that is not absolute truth is not truth. Because all truth is absolute. So, no, there's only one answer. The answer is the absolute truth. And for these so-called youths, the answer is that they find, recognize, accept, and know this absolute truth. And glory be, many of them are seeking, some of them have found. Isn't that glorious? I'm so delighted that there are so many of these so-called young people who have found and know. And a few of them have fully accepted this and love it, believe me, knowing that they have found themselves. That's all. They realize that it is their very existence. Now, when they seek us out, what are we going to tell them? What are we going to tell them? Well, the basic premise is the eternality of the identity. That's your basic premise. I'm not telling you how to talk or what to say or anything like that, but you're going to find not only opportunities, but you're going to find experiences where these so-called youngsters will be around, and you'll have great opportunities to be of help. And the first approach with them, as far as I can see, is the eternality of the identity. Now, a suppositional temporary identity has nothing at all to do with the eternal, genuine, and only identity. This eternal identity is ever perfect, complete, changeless, and above all, ever peaceful and joyous. The only identity there is uncreated. Now this they must know. The only identity there is uncreated. And of course, ultimately, we have to help them, I guess you'd call it, in their own self-revelation, that their parents are not to blame any more than they are. They must go back to the basic thing, the basic falsity that names God the Creator. You see, that's the thing. The only identity there is uncreated. The intelligence of the only identity in existence is an uncreated intelligence. The consciousness of being, of the only identity, is eternal consciousness. It's the uncreated consciousness. Can you imagine man believing that he can create consciousness? So there we go again. Thus, the identity's awareness that he exists is an eternal awareness. Now you see, it's because each and every one of us is an eternal identity that our only consciousness that we exist is an eternal consciousness. We wouldn't be aware that we exist as a temporary consciousness, because there isn't such a thing, you see. The life that is alive is a living identity in and no. The life that is alive as the living identity is an uncreated life, eternal by its very nature. The love that loves as the eternal identity is an eternal, constant, uncreated love, and this love has nothing at all to do with so-called conception and birth. Every identity is an eternal identity. This universe is eternally, constantly complete. In order to be forever complete, this universe requires the eternal, constant presence of everything, anything, and everything, and everyone that comprises this eternal, constant, complete universe. Now, I'd like to say that again. I just let it come. Now, this is a complete universe. It's an eternal universe. I'm talking about God, you know. It's a constant universe, but always it remains complete. Now, it does not fluctuate from its completeness to lesser or more complete. It's always equally complete. It's a constant thing. All right, now, in order to be constantly, eternally complete, this universe has to always consist of everything and everyone, every identity that is necessary to its completeness. This is why if there were a time, I don't like the word, before any one of us existed, in that moment this universe would be incomplete. You see? This is what I'm getting at. So, now I'd like to go back and read that again because it'll make more sense now. Now this is an eternally, constantly complete universe. In order to be forever complete, this universe requires the eternal, constant presence of everything and everyone that comprises this eternal, constant, complete universe. Now, is that clear? This is why nothing ever begins and nothing ever ends, or can. The Bible says there is nothing new under the sun. This is true. You know, that Bible's a great book. Thus, the eternality of every identity is necessary to the eternal completeness that is this universe. The eternality of every identity is necessary to the eternal completeness that is this universe, God. You know all of this. You can tell these children, can't you? They understand. They'll understand. If one identity were to be absent or missing, even temporarily, so much for reincarnation. Suppose one identity were to be, I'm not criticizing, I don't feel critical at all about this, because I'm not criticizing anyone who does believe in reincarnation. That's just fine if if they get comfort from it and a feeling, well, they'll get another chance to do better when they come back. Well, this is good. This is fine. I haven't anything against this. But I'm just so positive that it doesn't go far enough. That it isn't enough, that it doesn't mean, well, I'm just sick and tired of problems. You know, this birthing and dying business, honest to goodness. Oh, well, anyway. Where was I before the storm passed? Every identity is an eternal identity. Never in all eternity is there a new identity. Never. In all eternity. Just imagine. In all eternity, never was there a new identity. Not one. No identity ever comes into existence. No identity ever goes out of existence. Furthermore, no identity is ever brought into existence, nor can any identity be forced out of existence. It can't be done. This is for those of you who seem to grieve, feeling that you've lost loved ones, that kind of thing. Don't you believe it. Don't you believe it. Nothing has happened to them. Nothing, no matter what it be called, war or accident or whatever, they cannot be forced out of existence because they cannot be brought into existence. You see. The only identity is the eternal identity. Others, oh yes. And for those of you who have boys in the service, and who worry and fear, will they be back? They never left. That's the thing we know. That's the thing to know. So they can't come back. But they never mind. They never leave. They never leave. This is the truth. Now every eternal identity is everlastingly complete. You see, completeness is a universal, absolute truth. And this completeness means, means that everything is complete. My husband was telling me the other day that he read about, in a magazine, about some tiny little organism, I guess you'd call them, isn't that an awful word? About so tiny that they can't even be seen, you know, and you wouldn't know they were in a glass of water, or that they were the water. And he said that testing had proved that each one of these invisible little things is absolute complete, is a complete body, with every organ functioning perfectly. Imagine that. Now there's completeness. Why? Because absolute completeness is a universal fact. God is completeness. So naturally, each one of us has got to be complete. And every identity is a complete identity. That means that every identity is everlasting and complete. This completeness requires a body. Call the body an organ of your completeness if you like. Doesn't make any difference. But this completeness requires a body. Thus, a specific body exists as an aspect of every identity. A specific body. A specific body exists as an aspect of every identity, and this body is eternal, and this body is constant. Never do we put on a new body, nor do we put off an old body either. The specific body of every identity is as eternal as is the identity itself. Did you hear that? The specific body of every identity is as eternal as is the identity itself. And when you see the body, really see it, you see the eternal body. And it's that body, too. Now this is true because the body of every identity consists of the very substance. Now this substance is consciousness. Consciousness is Christ, the Christ body, the Christ consciousness body, Christ being the body being the Christ. You see. This is true because the body of every identity consists of the very substance, consciousness, that is the whole, complete, infinite, yet specific identity. In short, the eternal, constant body of the specific identity consists of the consciousness, the mind, the life, the love, that is the infinite, yet the specific identity. Of course, I'm sure there is no one in this room who does not realize that while he is a specific identity, you are you and no one else. But at the same time, you are not only a specific identity, you are infinite. Each and every one of us is infinite. Infinity itself. This is a fact. Because we are this indivisible, eternal universe. One of us is just this, as much this universe as the other. Why? Because there's no way to part and separate and fiddle around with consciousness. It just can't be done. In short, the eternal constant body of the specific identity consists of the consciousness, the mind, the life, the love, that is the infinite, yet specific identity. Furthermore, the activity of the body, which is an aspect of every identity. You know, everything has a body. A body is necessary. Absolute necessity. Everything and everyone. So, furthermore, the activity of the body, which is an aspect of every identity, is constantly in action. That's another thing to realize. The activity of the body is just as necessary as is the body itself. All is activity. The activity of the body is the infinite activity of the whole, complete, infinite, eternal, yet specific identity. You know, we get into trouble because it seems to us that there's an activity confined to this little body right here, this little pinpoint here of our infinite self. And the activity is unconfined. It's the whole, as the classwork said in 1966, it's a whole ocean, infinite ocean of the consciousness that you are. You are this infinite ocean of consciousness in action, and the activity of your consciousness is the activity that is going on here. Well, what in the world can keep it out of this here? Nothing. Nothing can force it into this. Nothing can keep it out. Nothing holds it either. But
I hope you enjoy this spiritual audio. Like, share and subscribe for more.